While it's always nice to be surprised by an unexpected hit, the writing does very much appear to be on the wall that these upcoming movies are destined to underperform, if not outright flop with critics or moviegoers, or possibly even both. Now, it'd certainly be great to be proven wrong when it comes to the following movies, of course, but audiences have become incredibly adept at smelling a dud a mile away, and this lot, all these movies right here, they reek of it, sadly. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 more upcoming movies that are already doomed. Number 10, Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. Needless to say, Zack Snyder's epically damp squib of a sci-fi movie known as Rebel Moon would have almost certainly flopped had it been given a conventional theatrical release. Yet such matters are simply trivialities to Netflix, who had Snyder shoot both this movie and its sequel back to back. And so, Rebel Moon Part 2 was already well into post-production before this first movie dropped in December and got panned and absolutely obliterated by critics. And the average moviegoer wasn't that much of a fan of it either. And while the trailer for the sequel does at least suggest that this second movie is going to be the more action-packed and no-nonsense of the two, given the uninspired Seven Samurai, Star Wars, Harry Potter mishmash thing that we got the first time around, do we have any reason to expect that this follow-up's going to be any better? Though the lack of concern about box office pretty much leaves this movie immune to poor reviews, it's worth noting that Part 1 didn't exactly post some really impressive viewing figures when it dropped on Netflix, so there's no reason to suggest that the follow-up's going to do any better. And it also doesn't help that this particular movie is also going to release a couple of weeks after a surely superior sci-fi blockbuster sequel in June Part 2, which I'm very excited about. Number 9, Toy Story 5. Back when a fourth Toy Story movie was announced, many fans were understandably quite unhappy about the whole thing, considering that Toy Story 3 ended on the most perfect of conclusions and most people were just like, do not touch that thing, leave it alone. Toy Story 4 nevertheless turned out pretty well, serving as a quite nice postscript for Woody and Buzz, and now we can leave them. They're quite happy, they're going off living their lives, that can be that. But of course it couldn't just be that, because back in 2023 Disney decided to once again just dip back into the Toy Story well, and we're now going to have a fifth one. I'm going all John Cena on this thing. Again, many people have balked at this idea because while we know that Toy Story movies are very rarely, well, pretty much never bad, this is clearly just a move to stem Disney's recent string of animated flops. And it's probably not because someone's got an incredible idea for a Toy Story sequel and it just has to be done. Yet when you factor in that Lightyear was a bit of an unexpected flop recently, and that is still tied into this whole Toy Story verse, that's actually provided proof that this franchise is not completely bulletproof. So don't be that shocked if Toy Story 5 does massively underperform at the box office in comparison to its predecessors and just does okay numbers. And for Disney, that'd honestly be a bit of a nightmare, really. Now I want to know something. Is Toy Story the greatest movie franchise of all time? Well, if it's not, you tell me what is in the comment section down below. Do it! Number 8, Back to Black. Ever since Bohemian Rhapsody made loads of money at the box office and brought home a ton of Oscars, Hollywood has seemingly been doing everything in its power to just churn out as many musical biopics as humanly possible. And next up we have Back to Black, the dramatization of singer Amy Winehouse's life and premature death. Now, Winehouse's story is definitely a fascinating and tragic one that might befit the cinematic treatment. But the trailer for Sam Taylor Johnson's film suggests it's just a bit of a generic, surface-level take, really, with actress Marissa Abella not resembling Winehouse nearly enough. More to the point, Asif Kafadia's 2015 documentary Amy felt like such a concise and effective summation of the star's life that it's tough to imagine this rather cheap-looking narrative version living up to it. Furthermore, the film has actually been endorsed by Winehouse's father, a controversial figure in her life who in that 2015 documentary was pretty much shown to be someone who exploited his own daughter. As such, it's reasonable to expect a relatively sanitized, straight-laced biopic here. Many of the singer's die-hard fans have questioned the film's necessity at all, and if they're not even convinced about why this movie's been made in the first place, then this particular movie does not have much of a chance of breaking out into the mainstream, does it? Number 7, Bill and Ted 4. 2020's third Bill and Ted movie, Bill and Ted Face the Music, wasn't a great sequel, but it more or less avoided the pitfalls of belated comedy follow-ups. It was a watchable, if forgettable, romp that didn't completely disgrace the legacy of its predecessors. Yet as the film only made $6.3 million at the box office, this one did very much feel like a one and done. But at the start of the year, star Alex Winter actually revealed that writers Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon were actually working on a script for Bill and Ted 4, with the intent to get it into production at some point in the near future. However, given that Bill and Ted 3 was just pretty okay, say, against all odds, going back to the well one more time does feel like tempting fate a little, and fans will likely be a little bit less charitable this time around because they've not been waiting 30 years for the sequel. Then again, this is all assuming that this potential fourth film, actually gets in front of cameras, of course, considering that Face the Music wasn't exactly a storming commercial success. Number 6, The Exorcist Deceiver. Last year's The Exorcist Believer, the direct sequel to William Friedkin's 1973 masterpiece, was the dud that everybody expected it to be, really. Few were asking David Gordon Green to give the Exorcist series the sequel trilogy treatment that he gave to the Halloween series, but hey ho, here we are. In 2021, Universal spent a staggering $400 million on the rights to the Exorcist franchise, and they were intent on producing a new trilogy of films, starting with Believer, of course. And while it did actually perform decently relative to its $30 million budget, Universal were probably expecting a little bit better than $137 million worldwide, given the pretty penny that they'd pay for the whole thing up front. Considering that Believer was widely panned by critics and a lot of fans, to be honest, and even given a dreaded C cinema score, see I tell ya, it doesn't really seem as though the planned sequel, The Exorcist Deceiver's gonna do that well either. Furthermore, Green, who was expected to direct the entire trilogy, walked away from Deceiver in January, at which point Universal removed it from its upcoming release calendar, which pretty much means it's likely not gonna hit that April 18, 2025 date it was scheduled for. It's very much a damn sequel either way when you look at it, because a direct continuation is unlikely to muster much interest, let's be honest. But the overall Exorcist brand might be too damaged at this point for people to care about another standalone entry. With Universal having spent so much money on the IP already though, something will likely happen soon, you expect. Something will be brought out. Number 5, the Kickass Reboot Trilogy. Late last year, Kickass director Matthew Vaughn announced that he's rebooting this entire R-rated superhero franchise. Or to be more precise, he's going to unleash a brand new trilogy of related films. Vaughn later added that these movies would center around a whole new cast of characters, meaning that we're probably not going to be reunited with Dave and Mindy from the first two movies. Since then, he's already confirmed that this entire new trilogy of movies will be kicked off with the already filmed school fight, with this being directed by his longtime stunt coordinator Damian Walters, while the two following movies have the working titles of Ram and Kickass. Except Vaughn is actually making quite the assumption here of the audience's hunger for more Kickass movies, isn't he? Let's be honest, most fans loathe the second Kickass movie, which was not directed by Vaughn, and given that it's been more than a decade since that sequel came and went, is there even an audience for this kind of stuff anymore? What felt fresh in 2010 may just feel a bit passé in 2024, especially as Deadpool's already made rated R boundary-pushing superhero fare totally mainstream at this point. Plus, accepting that Vaughn's had a pretty wonky track record when it comes to his movies over the last couple of years, his involvement is not the stamp of assurance it used to be. Put simply, this may not be kick-ass after all. Number 4, Megalopolis. One of the most fascinating, if surely ill-fated projects currently in production right now is definitely Megalopolis, the epic sci-fi drama from the legendary Francis Ford Coppola. The film, revolving around the rebuilding of New York City in the wake of an absolutely catastrophic catastrophe, has been Coppola's passion project for over 40 years. With the filmmaker struggling to find funding for his ambitious career coda though, many just assumed it had never really come to fruition. But in one of the all-time baller moves made by a master craftsman, Coppola decided to sell off a huge chunk of his wine empire to fund the movie himself for a cool $120 million. You know, he just really wants to get this movie made, doesn't he? And he's certainly amassed one hell of a cast to help him out. You've got Adam Driver, Forrest Whitaker, Natalie Emmanuel, Lawrence Fishburne, Aubrey Plaza, Sheila Burf, Jason Schwartzman, Talia Shire, Dustin Hoffman, and Giancarlo Esposito. They're all involved. And while there's a lot of justified excitement around what is surely going to be Coppola's final ever movie, unless he lives to like 200, the risks for this particular project speak for themselves. Conventional funding avenues wanted nothing to do with this for possibly good reason. There were reports of a troubled shoot, and let's be honest, Coppola has not made a good film in like 25 years, has he? It is very much easy to picture Megalopolis being a widely polarizing movie that doesn't really turn much profit. Though at this stage in Coppola's life and career, I think he just wants to get the film out there and go, ha, I did it. Number 3, Red One. Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans' new holiday-themed blockbuster wrapped shooting in February. 2023, and there was a release date originally set for 2023's Christmas period, obviously. However, word on the tentpole went curiously quiet over the last year, until mere days before Christmas, where it was announced that it had actually been delayed for like a whole another year, and it's going to be November 2024 when it drops now. While on one hand, the SAG-AFTRA strikes were cited as the main reason for this pushing back of the movie's release date. And let's be honest, the film does absolutely have to be released around the holiday season because look at it. Reports did soon emerge that this movie is in absolutely dire straits behind the scenes. Reliable insider Jeff Snyder claims that he's heard the movie is a quote-unquote unmitigated disaster, while noting an apparent lack of chemistry between Johnson and Evans and that the problems are so deep with this movie, reshoots won't even help. While on one hand, bland blockbusters are basically Johnson's brand at this point, given that Red One is teaming Jumanji director Jake Kasdan with Fast and Furious writer Chris Morgan, it's reasonable to expect a bit better here. Now yes, Amazon still have a year to try and whip this movie into some kind of shape, but if the scuttlebutt can be believed, it's not looking very good. Number 2, Captain America: Brave New World. It is not dramatic to suggest that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is at its all-time lowest ever point. After Phase 5 kicked off with the franchise's worst reviewed movie ever in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and most recently saw the Marvels deliver the lowest box office gross in Marvel history too. That's Marvel Cinematic Universe history. Though the upcoming Deadpool and Wolverine movie should offer some respite, some much needed respite for both Marvel fans and the folks behind the movies, things are looking decidedly less encouraging for Captain America: Brave New World. For starters, casual fans just have not embraced Sam Wilson as the new Cap. I like him, but a lot of people don't, making it highly unlikely this fourth film recaptures its 3 predecessors' zeitgeist appeal. Beyond that, insider reports have detailed disastrous test screenings which have necessitated 4 months of reshoots, and they're set to take place from May to August of this year, causing its release date to go from May 3rd of this year to next year's February. While on the one hand you must applaud Marvel for taking the time and money to try and fix one of their most crucial upcoming projects, the fact they clearly didn't have the fundamentals bolted down before shooting started is quite concerning, isn't it? When you pair a lack of Chris Evans and so much behind the scenes turmoil, it's tough to have anything but low expectations for Cap 4's ability to be both a commercial and critical success. Fingers crossed though, eh? I'm a positive guy, let's see what happens. Number 1, Magazine Dreams. Magazine Dreams premiered at the 2023 Sundance Festival to largely positive reviews, with people enjoying its intense and insightful look into the world of bodybuilding. The only problem? Well, its problematic star. Though Jonathan Majors' performance as Killian Maddox did earn him some decent reviews early on, and even courted some early Oscar consideration, the film's release strategy was derailed a few months later in the wake of harassment and assault allegations made against Majors. While originally set to release on the awards-friendly date of December 8, 2023, last October Disney pulled the film from their release calendar, and once Majors was found guilty in December, it was reported that Disney likely wouldn't even release the film at all, either on streaming or in theaters. As such, it's likely that Disney will just probably sell the distribution rights off at some point, whereafter Magazine Dreams are likely to just be dropped onto VOD at some point and then just disappear off into the ether. It's a disastrous, if understandable, result for such a well-received film given Majors' involvement, and the parallels between his hyper-aggressive protagonist and Majors' real-life crimes. Above all else, it's tough not to just feel for director Elijah Bynum. This dude had his big break scuttled by stuff completely out of his control, so hopefully he has a bit more luck on his next project, eh? We're sending you all of that luck. There you go, Elijah.